Despite being a country girl, her voice resonated with people. The same happened to his partner Per with the music he composed. Life made their paths cross. Then Roxette emerged, an adventure full of success and joy, but which would lead to a very cruel ending.
Welcome to Trembol Podcast, the place for music stories that thrill.
Chapter 1. Marie Fredriksson, a country girl.
Hello, my name is Gun-Marie Fredriksson, although Per Gessle, my partner from Roxette, always called me Miss F. I was born on May 30th, 1958, in Ösjö, Sweden. It was a village where I and the 195 other people who lived there had little to do. The best thing in town was a man who sold hot dogs. I never had money, but whenever I was hungry, he would give me a free sausage. Yippee! I had a large family, but with few resources. There were my parents, Charles Gustav Fredriksson and Ines Dagmar Fredriksson, my older sisters, Tina, Annalisa, and Ulla Britt, and my brother, Sven Arne. My father had a farm, but he had to sell it because of poor harvests, later becoming a rural postman. I loved to accompany him. We were singing together all the time. When I wasn't singing, I talked nonstop. In fact, my father called me the chatty little girl.
Blah, 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 blah.
I was very early riser, always the first in the family to wake up. As soon as I woke up, I would start singing in bed. I couldn't help it. I always wanted to sing. That's how I went on all my life. When I was 7 years old, tragedy struck that changed my family's life forever. My sister Annalisa was in a car accident and died on the spot. My father, who took care of the car, blamed himself and was shocked for years, refusing on alcohol. It was a horrible time. Things got a little better over the years, and in 1966, my father bought a tape recorder with which we recorded our own songs and theatrical performances. 2 years later, in 1968, my father bought a piano in installments. My sister Tina and I played it often, trying to compose something. I remember that my first song talked about something like a gray bird falling. At the age of 12, I started smoking and drinking because I was hanging out with my sister Tina and her 15-year-old friends. If you ask me when I realized that I was good for music, I would tell you that it was in the choir. I noticed that I was able to sing very loudly and strongly, and most important of all, that I was able to move people by singing. At the age of 17, I began to study economics, although it was clear to me that my only possible path was music, so I soon switched to a music module at a nearby university. With the 8 students in class, 3 girls and 5 boys, we made a group. Every time I went on stage, I felt at home, happy. That was my place in the world.
Chapter 2. Per Gessle and Marie Fredriksson cross paths.
When I turned 21, I was watching Supertramp in concert one day when I met Stefan Dernbrandt. He was a musician like me, and I liked him a lot, so he was my first boyfriend. I went to live with him in Halmstad, a larger city in Sweden. Stefan played drums in a group called Strulpojkar, Troublesome Boys. It would be then that I met the one who would later become my musical partner for life in Roxette, Per Gessle. But I played with my boyfriend from time to time, although he had his own group, Jolene Tider, Golden Age. My partner's band was renamed Strahl Troubles. At that time, the leader of the group, a boy named Martin, proposed that I compose a song for the group and sing it with them. I still remember one of our first performances. It was in a high school in Halmstad, in front of 400 people. The next day, the local newspaper published a news item with the following headline: "Stroll got it thanks to Marie." I still keep that article in my home. I started meeting people from the entertainment world, which led me to compose the music for a play called Attractive Attitudes. I also joined the Nissen Jazz Band for a while. As the name suggests, they played jazz. I went on tour with them, earning a few hundred crowns every night. I continued to play with the band Stroll. In fact, both their leader, Martin, and I moved around a lot trying to be heard by record companies. As friction makes affection, I left my boyfriend Stefan and started dating Martin. We were about to break up the band when we received an offer to record a single entitled Ki-I-I-Oo Stroll Igen, Ki-I-I-Oo Drunk Again, as well as participating in a TV show called Rock Circus. I was very excited that my father could see me for the first time on TV, but just before, at the age of 67, he passed away. He could not see his daughter succeed. Despite the TV, my group was not very successful, just the opposite of Per Gessle's golden age, which was managing to break through. Together with my partner Martin, I formed another group called Mama's Barn, Mama's Children. I'll tell you a secret, Per Gessle, my partner from Roxette, thought that I moved in circles that were too hippie and that we didn't fit in. I thought he was a bit of a posh kid, always had money and was incredibly pedantic and tidy, just the opposite of me. His full name was Per Gessle. He was born in Halmstad on the west coast of Sweden on January 12, 1959. His mother was a housewife and gave private lessons in porcelain painting. His father, a plumber, worked all day and saw him and his two siblings little. They formed a solid middle-class family, more stable and organized than mine.
Sir, yes, sir!
Per felt the call of music when he heard a record by the Kinks titled The Kink Controversy. Since then, he spent most of his time at the local music store. He got his first job in a greenhouse where he grew mushrooms, but on the second day he got bored of it and changed jobs. He went on to weigh the mushrooms. At school, he met several boys who formed a group called Audiovisuelt Angrepp. Among them, Mats MP Persson, with whom he would found the group Grape Rock, beginning to compose his own songs. Soon, Mikael Andersson and Jan Carlson would join to form the band Gillen Teeter, which I told you about. It was 1976. His group performed for the first time in 1978 in a small club in front of 50 people. Little by little they grew up, and 3 years later, in 1979, they recorded their debut album, named after them Golden Age, Gillen Teeter. It was moderately successful in Sweden.
Chapter 3. How did Roxette come about?
When Per and I met, he had just recorded the third album with his band and was still living at his parents' house. He liked glam rock, punk, and Patti Smith, while I lived in a pretty revolutionary hippie commune. Even though Per and I were so different, music brought us together. Do you know how? Well, it was listening to Tin Soldier by the Small Faces. Per Gessle and I fell in love with that song and began to understand each other. By the way, if you're wondering, the answer is no. Per and I never had a romance. We did become great friends. I would even say more brothers. I spent a lot of time in his apartment, watching series like Dallas or Dynasty and drinking wine. It was 1981. I was 23 years old and Per was 22. It would be then that we recorded our first song together, a Christmas song that they gave away with the magazine Schlager. The song was called Ingenting av vad du behöver, Nothing You Need.
Ingenting av vad du behöver. Ingenting av.
I will tell you one thing personally. I have always felt somewhat lost in life. Music was one of the few things that made me feel strong. At that time, my feelings oscillated from one extreme to another. Either I was in a radiant mood or I was alone, sitting in a corner crying my eyes out. My bandmate, Martin, was a machine gun of ideas, a hugely creative person, but also domineering, so I had a hard time recognizing myself in the music we made. We managed to release an album that received good reviews, although only 1,000 copies were sold. Martin thought we should continue working together, but I received offers from several record labels to start a solo career. That was just what I wanted, but it seemed like a betrayal of Martin. I remember calling my mother for advice. She told me, "Sure, you do the right thing, but try not to get into the world of drugs." A very motherly response, right? I finally accepted the offer of the EMI record label to make a solo album, which ended my relationship with Martin. I didn't care much because I fell in love with my producer at EMI, Lasse Lindbom. In 1984, I released my first solo album, Hot Wind. The single, Ännu doftar kärlek, It Still Smells Like Love, was successful in Sweden. So the following year, my partner Lasse and I composed the second album, Den sjunde vågen, The Seventh Wave. With that album came my real success in Sweden. I would also collaborate with Per's band on their only English-language album, The Heartland Cafe, released in 1984 and with which they sold 45,000 copies in Sweden. The album was also released in the United States but did not triumph. Per and I started talking a little more seriously about singing and playing together. We even wrote 2 songs, both in one afternoon. Ingen kan som du, Nobody Knows Like You, and Innan du går, Kom tillbaka, Before You Go, Come Back. In the summer of 1985, we did a small tour with guitars and singing in 2 voices. We were called Exciting Cheeses. The name came about because my ex, Lasse, who played with us, was asked what we were going to call each other when he was in a supermarket and saw the sign, Exciting Cheeses. It would be the head of the EMI label, Rolf Nygren, who first suggested that we make an album together. He said,
I remember that Per had written a damn good song. I thought that Per and Marie would fit in as Per writes great music and Marie can sing a phone book and get it to sound good. Of course, I'm a bit proud of getting the idea for Roxette.
Per was surprised that I wanted to form an official duo with him. At that time, I was a rising star in Sweden. I was offered to release my album internationally. Per's case was the opposite. His band had disbanded and he was not working alone. So he did everything he could to make me feel comfortable because he really wanted me to sing with him. In this way, we came together to create a group. The name was chosen by Per. It was going to be the one that his band would use when he went abroad, Roxette. But we kept it. Do you know where it comes from? It is the title of a 1975 song by Dr. Feelgood. Roxette means cool girl.
Chapter 4, Roxette's Big Dream.
With the new name, we released a single that went totally unnoticed, Teaser Japanese.
Teaser Japanese and boy, you're gonna get burned.
So we left the band aside. Per Gessle then focused on his solo career, recording his second album in Swedish, Scener Scenes, released in 1985. I did the backing vocals, while also recording my second solo album, Den sjunde vågen, The Seventh Wave. Shortly after, Gessle translated into English a song he had composed in Swedish called Svarta Glas, Black Glasses, changed the title to Never-Ending Love, and we recorded it together. In this way, Roxette released in 1986 what is considered our first official single. Never-Ending Love reached the top 10 in Sweden, so Per and I took several songs he had written for his third solo album and released Roxette's first album, Pearls of Passion. We sold 200,000 copies in Sweden. The album was not an international success, although a new remix album entitled Dance Passion was released the following year, 1987. Although the idea from the beginning was that Per and I, Marie Fredriksson, were going to write the songs together, we soon gave up. No one can measure up to Per when it comes to productivity. He wrote the lyrics very quickly, also in English, something I wasn't used to. So we changed the division of tasks. I would dominate the stage and Per would write most of the songs. It was very gratifying because each one of us had responsibility for what we did best. United, we become a great force. I also used to include 1 or 2 of my songs on each album, as well as being the star of Roxette. In the meantime, I released my third solo album, Efter Stormen, After the Storm. It was a new success, selling 200,000 copies. At that time, I had broken up with my partner Lasse, and although personally I was not doing very well, professionally it was crazy. Suddenly I had 2 careers in parallel, alone and with Roxette. I also wanted to take on the world, and nothing was going to stop me. To succeed with Roxette abroad, that was our big dream. We stamped T-shirts with the text, Today Sweden, tomorrow the world. Everyone laughed at us, but he who laughs last laughs better. The same year of Roxette's first album, 1987, we went on our first tour called Rock Runt Ricket with Eva Dahlgren, Orup, and Ratata, with whom we sang the song I Want You. One day during the tour, Per came up to me and showed me a new song he had written. Its name, The Look, was the best thing he had ever written. Believe it or not, it's completely absurd and wonderful lyric. When Per wrote the song, he wrote the first words he could think of fitting the beat, just so he had something to sing when he was composing the music. The idea was to redo the lyrics so that it would become a song in which I would sing the chorus, "He's got the look." But then Per thought he wanted to keep that crazy handwriting, and I thought it was a much better fit for him, so he was the one who sang it. In 1988, our second album, Look Sharp, a real bombshell. In Sweden, we achieved 7 platinum records, and thanks to a karam, we triumphed internationally. I'll tell you. It turns out that a young American named Dean Cushman, who was in Sweden for a student exchange, heard the record. He liked it very much, so on his return home, he took him to a local radio station in Minneapolis where he lived. The single began to be requested more and more, until in April 1989, the song became Roxette's first #1 in the United States, as well as the first song by a Scandinavian artist to achieve that position since a-ha achieved it with Take On Me in 1985. The Look reached the top 1 in 30 countries, becoming one of the most successful songs of that decade with 10 million copies sold. The album's second single, Dressed for Success, was also a hit. Not to mention the ballad Listen to Your Heart, our second U.S. #1.
Listen to your heart.
Per wrote it after talking to a friend who was having marital problems. Per's advice was just that, to listen to his heart. The album also included Dangerous. I didn't like it at first, but over time it became one of my favorite songs. In 1990, we wrote a song for the soundtrack of Richard Gere and Julia Roberts' film, Pretty Woman. Do you know what it is? It Must Have Been Love sold 9 million copies, reached the top 1 in 20 countries, is Roxette's most successful song in the UK, and is one of the most important ballads in history. Per explained the meaning of It Must Have Been Love like this.
When I wrote the lyrics to It Must Have Been Love, I wanted it to be about how important it is to find a partner in life that makes you better than you are. And the same can be said of Marie and me. From a musical point of view, we've always made each other a little better than we really are.
When I was going to take the photos for the cover of It Must Have Been Love, I cut my hair very short and dyed it blonde, as well as changing to a more rocker style with a leather jacket, leather pants, and ankle boots. This image would become an icon of the group.
Chapter 5, The 90s, Roxette's Decade.
In 1991, we released the album Joyride, whose title track, of the same name, returned to the top of the charts worldwide. The chorus, "Hello, you fool, I love you," came to Per when his longtime girlfriend, and who would become his wife in 1993, Åsa Nordin, left him a note on the kitchen table in which she said just that. "Hello, fool, I love you." The singles Fading Like a Flower,
Every time you leave the room, I feel I'm fading like a flower.
The Big L,
Big
And Spending My Time, one of the most beloved songs by Roxette fans, made Joyride a huge success, selling more than 10 million copies worldwide, being considered by many fans our best album.
Spending my time watching the days go by.
Between 1991 and 1992, we toured around the world on the Join the Joyride World Tour, which was attended by almost 2 million people in 107 unforgettable concerts. As a result of that time, we released Tourism, songs from studios, stages, hotel rooms, and other strange places. Recorded during the tour included a surprise in the form of an unreleased track, How Do You Do? It was a new success for Roxette. In just 3 years, we had achieved international success, sold 30 million records, reached number 1 on the Billboard 4 times, and toured the entire world. So the money started flowing. I bought a huge apartment and what I'd always dreamed of, a large grand piano. But more than the money, what filled me with pride was becoming an international pop star. I remember how Per and I looked into each other's eyes on stage and felt a dizzying emotion.
Now we are great,
said Per, and I couldn't help but agree with him.
Yes, we're big now,
I would reply. I will confess that Marie Fredriksson, the artist, could be conceited in those times. My attitude was,
don't come at me with nonsense.
by the way, tours are wonderful, but they also have the part of loneliness you feel when you get off the stage. By that time, Per had already met the woman who would be his wife Asa, but I was alone. At times, I felt lost and insecure and took refuge in alcohol. Everything would change for me when I met the love of my life, Mikael Boljos, although I call him Mika. Our story began in December 1991. Mika had decided to go to Sydney to find himself with the last money he had left. I was walking with Roxette on tour. We met on the beach and started talking. I invited him to dinner, and that same day I fell in love with him. It may seem crazy, but the next day she spent all her money on 2 wedding rings, and on the 3rd day we were engaged. Mika would become my husband in 1994 and father of my 2 children, as well as our tour companion. As Roxette, we took a short break, which I took advantage of to release my 4th solo album,
Den Ständiga Resan,
The Endless Journey, which included
Sparvoga,
Sparrow's Eye. It's the first song completely mine, music and lyrics. It was used in a series of the same name and became very popular. In the early 1990s, there was such a stir every time we went out that we couldn't even go out to eat, although it was worth it for the love of the fans.
it's something unmatched.
In 1993, we composed another song for a soundtrack, in this case for the movie Super Mario Bros. I'm talking about Almost Unreal.
It's almost unreal. It's almost unreal.
We also made history by being the first non-Anglo-Saxon band to record an unplugged for MTV. We did another little break from Roxette, this time because I wanted to dedicate myself more to my family. I had my first daughter, Josephine, although when she was still a baby, in 1994, we returned with our 5th studio album, Crash, Boom, Bang. It was a strong turn for Roxette towards rock. It took us more than 1 year in the studio, and when we finished, Per was still not happy. He felt that he needed more pop. He started composing and created a commercial guitar riff, but with distortion, something that expressed the frustration and anger he felt about getting older. The result was the first single from the album, Sleeping in My Car.
Sleeping in my car, I will undress you. Sleeping in my car, I will caress you. Staying in the backseat of my car, making love. Oh, 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 oh.
It was a bombshell in Europe, Asia, and Latin America. Other singles from the album were Crash, Boom, Bang, Fireworks, Run to You, and Vulnerable, a beautiful ballad.
Yeah, she's so vulnerable. Like China in my hand, she's so vulnerable. And I don't understand.
Between 1994 and 1995, we went on our second international tour, the Crash Boom Bang World Tour, 80 concerts that reached Russia and China, being the first band since Wham! That played in the Asian country. Memorable was also Stop in South Africa, where we sang in front of 130,000 people. Along with the tour, we released an album of rarities entitled
Rarities.
with demos, unreleased, and remixes. In 1995, we released our first greatest hits, Don't Bore Us, Get to the Chorus, Roxette's Greatest Hits. It included several unreleased tracks, June Afternoon, I Don't Want to Get Hurt, and the track that returned us to the top 10, You Don't Understand Me.
You don't understand me, my baby. You don't seem to know that I need you so much. You don't understand me, my feelings, the reason I breathe in my love.
This is the only song in Roxette's career where we wrote with someone outside of the group, Desmond Child. The result? 5 million sales. In 1996, we decided to translate our best-known ballads into Spanish as a tribute to the Hispanic audience. The album was called Baladas en Español, Ballads in Spanish. As expected, became a sales record in Spain and Latin America with Un Día Sin Ti, A Day Without You, and No Sé Si Es Amor, I Don't Know If It Is Love.
No sé si es amor, pero lo parece. Con él soy feliz.
Chapter 6. Marie Fredrikson's Tragedy.
At the end of 1996, I had my second son, Oscar, and decided to take a vacation to dedicate myself more to family. Meanwhile, Per continued with his solo career, releasing his album, The World According to Gessle, his first solo album in English. A little later, I would do the same with
En tid som vår.
In a Time Like Ours. In 1997, Per and his wife, Åsa, had their only son, Gabriel. Both Per and I would take our families on tour. Our children liked it very much. It had been 5 years without releasing new Roxette material, so Per and I got together to create Have a Nice Day, released in 1999. Although musically it was very good because we introduced a very cool electronic part. Personally, I have very bad memories. We started working with a new record producer named Michael Ilbert. He was too authoritarian and arrogant, and he only talked to Per. He harassed me like a beast. It even made me cry. That man brought me down. Nothing I did seemed right to him. I went from feeling safe and happy singing to totally losing confidence in myself. I ended up feeling more and more outside of Roxette. I lost the desire and ended up leaving there. Even so, the album has very good songs such as Wish I Could Fly,
Wish I could fly out in the blue.
Anyone,
Anyone who ever kissed in the rain knows to hold me in it.
Salvation, and Stars.
Wherever you go, I'm going with you. Shouldn't you know I'm about to follow? Whatever you say, whatever you do, I'll give you a clue. I'm gonna follow.
which were among the 10 most listened to songs of the year in Europe. On our next album released in 2001, Room Service, we continued to use elements of electronica, but this time returning to our rock and pop roots. The Center of the Heart was the first single. We accompanied the album with a tour of Europe. The truth is that for this album, I lacked motivation. Per and I have been very close to each other, but we have also argued and needed to separate for some time. That's what it was like in the early 2000s. We needed to take a break, and so we did. Meanwhile, the label released 2 compilations, the ballad hits and another of pop hits, presenting them with A Thing About You, and Opportunity Knocks. It was 2002. Everything seemed to be going well. Per and I got together again to prepare a return tour when my personal hell broke loose. I went for a run early as I did many times. When I came back, I began to feel nauseous. I had an epileptic seizure and fell to the floor, fracturing my skull. The next thing I remember is waking up in the hospital with a doctor telling me that we had to cancel the tour because I had a brain tumor. The doctor told my husband Mika that I had 1 year to live, or at most 3. He turned pale and decided not to tell me to keep my hope and that of our children, Josephine and Oscar, who were 9 and 5 years old at the time. I had a satisfactory operation and underwent chemotherapy, leaving me bald, but that was the least of it. The worst thing was the impossibility of living with my family as before. The worry, the constant going back and forth to the hospital, the media that constantly speculated about my health, everything made our day-to-day very complicated.
Chapter 7. The Long Road to Recovery.
The disease had also kept me away from music, until 2 years later I started composing with my husband again. Per had released a solo album called
Mazaran.
in 2003, and would do the same in 2005 with Son of a Plumber. Unfortunately, my illness was still there, so much so that in 2003 I stopped understanding some basic things. For example, they asked me to close the door and I couldn't. I prepared dinner for my children and I couldn't put things in order. They decided to have a third operation to remove the part of the brain damaged by radiation. After the operation, I suffered from a type of aphasia. I knew all the time what I wanted to say, but I couldn't find the right words. Can you imagine what anguish? For 2 years, I could hardly say anything. It was a very long period where Mika, my husband, and I couldn't talk at all. I wasn't able to read and had no short-term memory. I had forgotten everything I knew. Moreover, due to the cortisone I had to take a day, 32 pills, my face swelled, so much so that I didn't even recognize myself. I was totally devastated. I felt ugly and alone. During my recovery, I started painting, and my drawings were exhibited in art galleries in Europe. With the energy I had left, I composed a solo album that I released in 2004, The Change. The main theme, The Good Life, recounts all the sadness of those years, although the rest of the album was very luminous.
It's a good life to be free and explore the unknown.
In 2005, Per received an award in London for being the composer of 2 of the most played songs in recent years on American radio stations, Listen to Your Heart and It Must Have Been Love. Per called me and asked me to come. I couldn't say no, so that was our first public appearance after 3 years. In celebration of the band's 20th anniversary, in 2006, we released a box set called The Rocks Box with 2 new songs, One Wish and Reveal, plus all our hits.
I reveal everything for you.
I returned in 2006 with an album of Swedish versions entitled
Min bäste vän.
My Best Friend, while Gessle recorded 2 more solo albums,
En händig man.
A Practical Man in 2007 and Party Crasher in 2008. In 2009, I started to feel better, so Per and I decided to go on a 40-concert tour of Europe, but always believed that I would recover. He was a huge support all the time. He is a super positive person who always encourages you and puts you in a good mood. Not to mention his creative ability, he writes one song after another. Thanks to him, Roxette returned. Yahoo! In 2011, I had routine MRIs again, and the great news was confirmed. The cancer had disappeared. Although unfortunately, all the lesions that the radiation left on my bones, hand, legs, brain would remain with me for the rest of my life. To celebrate, we release a new Roxette album, Charm School, presented with She's Got Nothing On But the Radio.
She's got nothing on but the radio.
We went on a world tour again, visiting Russia, South America, and all continents in more than 80 concerts. Roxette's 9th studio album, Traveling, would arrive in 2012. In it, we mix new songs with live songs and new versions. The following year, 2013, Gessle reunited with his former band, Galen Tider, releasing an album and touring Sweden. I also wanted to go on a solo tour to present my album
New.
Now. My husband Mika was skeptical at first because he thought he should save his strength for Roxette's big world tour that was going to start at the end of that year. But when he realized how important it was to me, he immediately gave me his full support and also came with me playing the piano during the tour. You won't believe it, but the biggest challenge was learning the old letters. With my neurological injury, it was extremely difficult. Thank goodness that my son Oscar, with his infinite patience, helped me by repeating word by word over and over again. The tour was a musical success, and above all, a personal one.
Chapter 8. Marie left us. Roxette will always live.
The world tour with Roxette arrived, and even though I had to sing sitting down for fear that my foot would fail me, the tour went very well. Roxette's last album, Good Karma, was released in 2016. The first single, It Just Happens, reached the charts in many countries. The idea was to go on tour to celebrate Roxette's 30th anniversary, but we had to cancel it because I was starting to feel bad again. My health deteriorated little by little until December 9th, 2019, at the age of 61. I, Marie Fredriksson, passed away after a 17-year fight against cancer. My partner Per Gessle composed the song Around the Corner, the comfort song, in my honor, writing these words.
Time goes by so quickly. It's not that long ago we spent days and nights in my tiny apartment in Halmstad, listening to music we loved, sharing impossible dreams, and what a dream we eventually got to share. Thank you, Marie. Thanks for everything. You were an outstanding musician, a master of the voice, an amazing performer. Thanks for painting my black and white songs in the most beautiful colors. You were the most wonderful friend for over 40 years. I'm proud, honored, and happy to have been able to share so much of your time, talent, warmth, generosity, and sense of humor. All my love goes out to you and your family. Things will never be the same.
In 2020, an unreleased track called Let Your Heart Dance With Me came to light as part of the compilation Bag of Tricks. In 2022, we released another compilation of remixes entitled ROXRMX. My partner, Per Gessle, decided that he would continue with the Roxette adventure solo under the name PG Roxette, knowing that he always keeps me in his heart.
Roxette's legacy is forever written in the hearts of generations of music lovers around the world, past, present, and those to come. We hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and share it with everyone.
Thank you very much, Trembles. We love you.